Oh, okay. Welcome everybody to Break the Divide's first ever workshop. We are so excited that you are here and so grateful that you came to join the evening, day, morning, whatever it is with us. My name is Siena and I'm the Director of Education at Break the Divide. And I'm working with Eric, who's the Director of Resources at Break the Divide. And today, as many of you probably know and can see from the screen, we are going to be presenting and teaching you all about empathy. So before we really get into the presentation, I am going to begin with a land acknowledgement, and then Eric is going to talk about Remembrance Day, which is today, November 11th, in the context of empathy. Also, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to leave them in the chat. And like we said, there will be some opportunities for you to participate. And at those opportunities, you can turn on your mic, raise your hand, or participate in the chat as well. Let's see if I can change the slide. I can. Okay, so I'm just going to go over first what a land acknowledgement is, who started the tradition of doing land acknowledgements, and then talk about it in the context of empathy. So the purpose of a land acknowledgement is to recognize the presence of Indigenous people as traditional stewards of the land that is now Canada. Land acknowledgements were recognized by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which seeks to acknowledge and educate the impacts of colonization, the ongoing impacts as well, and move towards a future of healing. So the land acknowledgement that you can see on the screen before you and what I'm about to read out is specific to the region that I am situated on, which is in Scarborough, Ontario, which is specifically the east end of Toronto. So if Eric was reading the land acknowledgement, his might be a little bit different just because he is situated in Toronto's west end. Sorry about that. I was trying to move something on the screen. 1 second. I'm just going to move this over here so I can see it. Perfect. Okay. I acknowledge that I am hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. I also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and I am grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Empathy plays a significant role in the process of truth and reconciliation. We must empathize with those who have been harmed by colonization by acknowledging the truth of the past and present injustices being done to Indigenous communities. We further our goal of reconciliation by developing an empathetic understanding and by acknowledging the role we can play in creating a more equal society. We must actively use empathy to accurately and effectively move into a more just and reconciled future. So throughout the presentation and even after the presentation, we encourage you to consider the land with which you are situated on and its context related to empathy. And for those of you that don't know, just to clarify, Turtle Island, to a lot of Indigenous communities here in Canada, is North America. So Eric is going to talk to you all about Remembrance Day.
So as many people in Canada right now would understand, today on November 11th is Remembrance Day. And Remembrance Day is more of a North American, Western Europe sort of day of remembrance for those who lost and gave their lives in World War I and World War II. It's also extended to recognize the lives of those who gave their lives in subsequent conflicts like the Korean War, Vietnam War, and then also the War on Terror in the Middle East. This is not to say that these are the only conflicts where men and women have gave their lives. That is important. It's also very important that countries all around the world have a responsibility to remember those who gave their lives in the pursuit of peace and the pursuit of resolving conflict. And this could be in the context of anything from armed conflict to emotional conflict, psychological conflict, and anything in between. So right now, we would encourage and we hope that all of you would join us in having a moment of silence for those who lost their lives and gave their lives to making sure that we have a more peaceful world. Thank you very much for that. And to relate Remembrance Day to empathy, it's very important that we incorporate empathy into our day-to-day lives, because conflict and war and intensity and any sort of confrontation, it's not black and white. It's not good versus evil as maybe movies would want us to assume. It's very much a gray area in our sort of human nature. And there's always some sort of good and there's always some sort of bad in everyone. And it's really important that we are open and willing and able to empathize with other people in order to further conflict resolution. So which is why it's important to incorporate practicing empathy on Remembrance Day around the world.
Right, thank you for that, Eric. So we are now going to move into the presentation. We have a question for all of you. And you can respond, like I said, in the chat or use the raise your hand function and we'll call on you. Our question is, what is empathy? There's no right or wrong answer here. We just want to hear your interpretation.
And again, if anyone wishes to raise their hand or unmute themselves, feel free to go ahead and do so. If not, type in the chat. That's also welcomed. I will start us off by thinking what I think personally, what I thought empathy was growing up. I've been told and I've been taught what empathy is the idea of putting ourselves in other people's shoes. And it means understanding and reflecting on their experiences and how those experiences impact my own. So growing up, that's sort of how I learned about empathy, but I'm also curious to see how other people who are on this call right now have also experienced and learned about empathy. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. If you feel comfortable, speak up.
Okay, that is totally okay. I'm going to go on with the presentation and explain what we at Break the Divide think about empathy. Someone raised their hand. Perfect.
Hi, I don't know
Hi.
if you can see me. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. For me, as you said, it's like you try to understand what others are feeling, right? And it doesn't matter if you can try to understand their pain or their happiness. It's like you really try to understand that and try to do something about it. Yeah, that it is. And a lot of people is talking in the chat also. So yeah, that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Valeria. Eric, I can't see the chat. I can't figure out how to see it. Can you?
I will handle the chat. So yes.
And maybe read them out.
Nav Karen, I hope I pronounced your name correctly there, but you have a very interesting insight. Yes. Hello, I think empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes and looking at something from a different person's perspective. And yes, that is very true. You have to incorporate how that other person's actions or that person's sort of perspective or outlook on life is different from yours. And you have to be able to understand that. Miriam, you said that empathy is feeling sympathetic about other people's situations. That is also very true. These are some very, very good insights into what empathy is. Siena, how about you provide what we at BTD think empathy is?
Right, those were amazing responses. In fact, most of them can fit directly into our definition, but we at BTD think that empathy is the ability to develop a concerned response and understanding to another person. It requires feeling, thinking, and often an emotional reaction. So Navkaran, I'm really glad you brought up the phrase of putting yourself in another person's shoes, because I remember being in kindergarten and that was how I was taught about empathy. So because I was taught about empathy from such a young age, I kind of grew up thinking I was an empathy expert, as I assume many of you probably did as well. And in fact, to a certain extent, we kind of are, because when we see, for example, our friend crying, a family member hurt, maybe you're celebrating your little sibling graduating middle school or high school, you can share their emotions and feelings. You feel sad for them, you're worried for them, you're excited with them. And that is empathy. For many of us, it comes naturally. You don't even realize that you're doing it. However, that does not mean that we're necessarily practicing empathy to the best of our ability. And today, Eric and I hope to give you the tools that will allow you to be as empathetic as possible and create environments with which you can encourage other people to be as empathetic as possible as well. So why is empathy important? Well, because you're at a Break the Divide workshop, I'm going to assume that most of you care a lot about fostering engagement and community involvement and breaking divides. So empathy will allow you to foster even stronger relationships and create environments in which people feel trusted and safe and respected and valued. And throughout this presentation, we're going to go into more detail about how that can happen and what this might look like, but I'm going to pass it on to Eric to explain a little bit more.
Sure. Like our goal with this workshop is to create empathetic environments and give you all the tools to help create empathetic environments within your own communities. And what do I mean by in terms of like an empathetic environment? It means like a place where naturally our connections grow stronger and our connections are fostered in a way that we feel closer and we feel more open and aware of other people's. And just naturally our sense of empathy from these situations grows over time because we're more and more comfortable. So specifically, what is a diverse environment? Well, a diverse environment is a place where it's sort of outside your comfort zone. This is an excellent place to kind of go and be exposed to people that are unlike ourselves and learn from their experiences and how they might be related to your own and how your experience might be related to their experiences. And frankly, just how all our experiences are interrelated. So working in diverse environments offers our ability to sort of diversify our exposure to like new ideas and ways in which people interact with each other. So working in diverse environments allows us to do a few things. First, it recognizes that just how complicated and layered we all are as individuals. Like no person is the same. I am not the same person as Siena, of course, and Siena is not the same person as I am. We're very two distinct, independent people, and that is what makes humans so amazing. But it's also important to make sure that our complexities are taken into consideration when we are sort of discussing and having conversations. And this is where empathy comes into. It recognizes our differences and how they can be played off each other. Second, diverse environments allow us to gain a strong connection and a sense of empathy for all different kinds of people. This relates back to my previous point on the idea that all individuals and all people are different. So being able to be exposed to different environments allows us to see and feel empathy towards a bunch of different kinds of people. Lastly, working in diverse environments actually allows prejudices, which are sort of unfavorable opinions towards other people, they weaken because we're being exposed to more and more new kind of people. And it actually builds our desire to make the world a better place, which I think, because you're at this workshop, I think we all have a desire to make the world a better place. So we believe that empathy is actually a critical aspect in connecting the world and to eliminate something that we call as polarization, which is the division of ideas into two sharply contradicting parties. And many of you have probably seen the idea of polarization going around in US politics right now, for example. But it's not just in the political world. It's also in our day-to-day lives where our ideas can be stuck in certain contrasting camps, and we need empathy in order to bridge those two ideas and find an equitable solution between the two ideas. So we want to make sure we give you guys the tools to practice empathy when meeting and working with all kinds of different people, and that's what we hope to get out of this workshop. So moving on to how we demonstrate empathy, and this can be a difficult topic, but a good place to start on how we demonstrate empathy is understanding each other and trying to understand each other from a perspective of what they want to get out of something. So we have to be willing and open enough to put ourselves, as we've said, in someone else's shoe. We have to be willing to stop thinking about ourselves and think about how the other person is thinking, how they want to react to a certain situation. As Siena talked about earlier, empathy incorporates an emotional response to situations. However, emotional response is not the only thing that's required of empathy. It also requires us to actually care and value another person. So right now, I'm going to pause. I want to ask you all to take that pen and paper we asked you to have and write down a few ideas of like how you demonstrate empathy or how you can demonstrate empathy in your conversations today or going into tomorrow or going into the future in the long term. but I want you to write down a few ideas in terms of like how you might be able to demonstrate empathy, and then save that paper, and we'll come back to that at the end of the presentation and discuss it. So I'll give you guys 5 to 10 seconds to do that, and then we'll carry on. Sure, I would like you to write down a few things, or write down a few ideas that where you can demonstrate empathy in your day-to-day life. So how do you personally, as an individual, demonstrate empathy to people you're talking to or interacting with on a day-to-day life? So I would like you to write a few of those ideas down and then hold on to those ideas, and we'll discuss it later on at the end of this presentation in our discussion period. Does that make sense?
I can give an example if that would help.
Go ahead.
So the way that when I was reflecting on this today in preparation for the presentation, my little sister is in grade 12 English right now, and she was really stressed with an assignment she was working on. English is one of my favorite subjects, so I couldn't really relate immediately to the frustration. But then I took a step back and remembered that she has a different mind than me. She has different challenges. She has different talents. And so I was able to put myself in her shoes and consider maybe why she'd be frustrated, the reasons for being frustrated, and I was able to help her, I think, more effectively because of it.
Perfect. That's an excellent example, Sienna. Okay, so we'll move on. I can't wait to listen to what your ideas were in terms of how you demonstrate empathy. For now, I want to talk about sort of working in diverse communities. You have to understand that things take time, and empathy is one of those things that take a long time to develop. And honestly, that's okay. It's perfectly fine for these things to take a long time, because that's just how we naturally as humans sort of, it just happens. Okay, so we have to be patient and willing to let things run their course like that. But there are a few ways in which we can actually improve the ability for empathy to develop and to come about. One is active listening, which we'll discuss in a second. Second is having healthy conversations, which we'll again discuss later on in the presentation. And the last thing is trust, building trust and having a sense of trust within our communities. These three things will help establish and develop empathy within our communities in our day-to-day life.
All right, so you are all very lucky because we are giving you a sneak peek into our next workshop, which will be taking place at the end of the month. And if you are interested in coming to that workshop, the information will be set out closer to the end of November. But that presentation will be on active listening. However, Eric and I decided that in order to properly discuss and educate you on empathy, we did need to go into active listening and provide just a general understanding of how active listening can create empathetic conversations and empathetic environments. So a lot of us think of conversations just in terms of talking. For example, I say something, Eric says something, I kind of respond to what he's saying, he responds to what I'm saying. But empathetic conversations are really based on listening. So all of us actively listen in different ways. And first I'm going to give you just a general definition of what active listening is. Active listening is not just hearing what the other person is saying, it's reflecting on it, engaging with it, summarizing it in your mind. But like I said, we all actively listen in different ways. So for example, the way that I actively listen is asking follow-up questions. This allows me to reflect on what the other person was saying and kind of summarize it in my mind to make sure that I have an understanding of what they've said. But it also shows the other person that I respect them because I took the time to create a thoughtful response and a question that really relates to their opinions or perspectives or experiences. But I acknowledge that not everybody actively listens the same way. Now, if you're seeing a white square on your screen right now, don't worry. We're going to explain what that is. But because we all actively listen in different ways, we actually have another activity for you all. We want to know how you actively listen. So if you, again, want to put this in the chat or raise your hand like Valeria did, and we'll call on you, we are going to edit this presentation and put together a list of, oh, I've been signed out of my Google Slides. You can all see this right now, right? I'm going to stop screen sharing for 1 second, and I'm going to type that in. Eric, why don't you start by giving me an example of how you actively listen, and I'll be sure to put that on the presentation first.
Absolutely. So the way I actively listen is through eye contact. So I think eye contact is very important when I actively listen, because I don't want to be looking around. So if you look at my screen now, like I can be looking around my room right now, and it doesn't really show I'm engaged. So like to show that I'm engaged in the conversation, to show that I'm engaged with what the other person is talking about, I want to make sure that I'm actually looking at them and I'm visually engaging with them through my eyes. And they see that I am really into their conversation because I'm making that effort to have eye contact with them and to be able to really connect with what they're saying. So that's how I personally actively listen. And I'm very curious to see how other people will actively listen. So now,
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Sorry, Eric. Okay, perfect.
So now, Karen, you say that I actively listening by nodding my head, raise my hand during conversations, and sometimes add more to what they said. That's perfect. I think nodding your head is really, really good because you're showing a recognition of hearing what they said and a confirmation that what they're saying is important to you. So I think that's a fantastic way to showcase active listening.
What was the second one? Raising my hand.
Raising my hand, and then the last one was adding more to what they said. So contributing to the conversation. Nasheen, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. I hope I pronounced it as well as I could. I use body language to show that I am actively listening and ask them to elaborate on something they said. That's amazing. Again, body language refers back to what I said about eye contact, and having like a slumped down posture like this means like you're not really into it. But if you're standing straight up, you actually feel really engaged in the conversation, and the other person sees that. Asking to elaborate is also really important because it shows that you want to learn more and you want to hear more from what they have to say. So it shows that you are engaged in that conversation. Does anyone else have any ideas on or anyone else want to share how they personally actively listen in conversations? Miriam says, giving affirmation to their stories. Yeah, absolutely. You want to make sure that you have a positive reaction to their stories and showcase that their stories are actually meaningful. That's really important. Ariana says that I use face expressions to let them know I'm listening. Again, that's also really important. That kind of touches on what I said, what Nasheen said in terms of having positive body language. Jasmine says, one great way I would be to listen without being biased. For instance, if somebody opens up, don't disregard them if that isn't a big deal for you. Showing support through actions, asking and comforting the other person. Yes, I think what you talked about in terms of bias, that is really important. You want to make sure that you don't let your personal biases affect how you interact with their stories and how you interact with what their perspective is. You want to try to separate your personal experiences from their own and give other people confirmation that their experiences matter because everyone's experiences matter in life. I think these are some great and fantastic ways to actively listen. Isabella, one last thing. I let them say everything they need to say and then ask them how they feel about it. That's excellent. I really like that because you're letting them get the information out there, and then you're also asking for like a personal reflection from them. That showcases that you really want to get to know their perspective on a more personal and deeper level and have that deeper connection, which is also really important. These are phenomenal, some of these ways in which we actively listen. I hope that everyone has the ability to take in what these people have said and utilize these strategies in their everyday life going forward.
Yes, exactly. So exactly what Eric said. The reason we wanted to create this list is to contribute to this resource a bunch of different ways in which people might actively listen. And as Eric has already talked about, we're going to be working in diverse environments throughout our whole life. And that means that people are going to react and behave in ways very different from the ways that we do. And it's important to keep in mind that just because somebody isn't acting the way that you do or responding the way that you do does not mean that they are not actively listening, for example. So this is a great list to refer to. Feel free to take a picture of it, write it down. I'm not sure if this presentation, oh, well, you can watch the recording again later if you need to. But if you're in a group environment or leading a Break the Divide club or anything in your life, this is a great list to refer to, just to remind yourself that everyone actively listens in different ways.
So taking what we've just learned about actively listening, we want to change the conversation now to talking about the value of conversation. And quite literally, conversation leads to connection. This is because when two individuals talk, they share this sort of common dialogue where you feel connected to that person because you're actually taking in what they have to say and the other person is taking in what you have to say. This naturally forms some type of connection between the two of you, which you build and foster this better bond. Conversations expose us to these new perspectives and experiences, and this itself is like the value that comes from it. We're able to have these new perspectives and experiences that will then shape our personal outlook on the rest of our life. So by taking what we've learned about active listening, a good conversation requires you. I will stress this, it requires you to actively listen to the other person because it want to make sure that that person knows that they can be comfortable enough to talk to you about things. And you also have to be comfortable enough to say things to them, which requires them to actively listen to you. So I will stress it again, conversation requires active listening. There are a few things to keep in mind to make sure that everyone is feeling heard in conversations. The first thing I want to talk to you is the idea about moments of selection, and this is on our resource that will be given out to all of you. As a listener, you should take the moment to digest what that person said. If you are in a conversation and you're just waiting for the person to end what they're saying and then you say whatever you want to say without sort of taking in what they said, it shows that you actually didn't really care about what they said and all you want to do is get your point across. That's dangerous just because by only getting your point across or showing that only your point matters, it devalues their perspective and makes the conversation less valued and undervalued because there's no connection. I keep saying these buzzwords, but it means that when there's no ability to actually build off each other's perspectives, it means that there's no actual sort of progress being made between the two people in this conversation. The second thing I want us to consider when we're having these group discussions is the consideration of other people's reactions. So we've talked about emotions and how emotions play into empathy and conversations as a whole. Make sure that you consider that everyone reacts in different ways. And an empathetic listener watches out for those reactions. So say I'm in a group of 4 people. One person's talking, there's myself and 2 other participants. As an empathetic listener, I'm watching and listening to what the person's saying, but I'm also watching and listening to the reactions of other people. And being as an empathetic listener, what I say afterwards and my reaction to what's being said will be shaped based on the reactions of other people because I want to make sure that what I say won't give them a poor reaction or a negative reaction. I'm actively engaging, actively watching and paying attention to the reactions of others. So empathy actually allows people to feel valued and therefore more inclined to share because they're more comfortable in a situation. There are a few things to keep in mind though when you're having an empathetic conversation. One is you versus I statements. You don't want to, like I just said, you don't want to be solely focused on what you want to contribute. So I want to contribute this. It's not always the best thing. You always want to talk about how your perspective relates to the other person and you want to incorporate you statements into the dialogue because you want to make sure the other person feels comfortable enough to be in a proper conversation with you. The next thing, as Siena mentioned, is the way she sort of participates in conversation is ask for follow-up questions. Again, because that shows that you are engaged and you are listening to what that person said and you have an interest in what that person's saying. The last thing is, I've already kind of touched on this, but it's emotional competency. And what I mean by that is that you are aware of the emotions of other people and that shapes how you go forward in the conversation. And it means that you are aware of people's emotions and you provide intelligent emotional responses that are respectful of other people.
Okay, so when I was originally writing this resource, Eric edited it for me. And he left a comment on my section on building trust that said something along the lines of, well, I don't think that trust is necessary for empathy. And to a certain extent, he is absolutely correct. And he gave the example of, if I saw a man fall down on the street, a complete stranger who I had no connection to or I didn't trust because I didn't know him, I would still feel empathy for him. And of course, you would probably feel concerned or sad, or it might remind you of something else that you've experienced in your life. But the type of empathy that we want to help you develop and the type of empathetic environments we want you to develop do require trust. So why is trust important for building empathy? Well, when people trust each other, they are more inclined to be vulnerable. They will take down those walls and share their personal experiences. They will be creative and innovative and not afraid to do so. And this is when we have the best conversations, the most pure conversations where people aren't letting their fear of judgment or their fear of not really knowing these people or not knowing if they can trust these people get in the way. And that's when we can be the most empathetic. So we actually have an activity for this one as well. So this one has a few steps. The first step is to pull out that piece of paper and pen that we asked you to bring. And we want you to describe how you would react to the following situation. I do want to warn you that the situation is a little bit sad. It mentions death, so that's just something to keep in mind. But the situation is one of your friends has just told you that their relative has passed away, and they're really sad about it. So take a few minutes to write out a step-by-step or just a kind of paragraph summary of how you would respond in this situation. And then hold on to it. And then the next part, when you return, we're going to discuss what we're going to do. So I'll give you a few minutes to write out how you would respond to your friend telling you that a relative has passed away. This is also a great opportunity, if you have any questions, to leave those in the chat because we can discuss those while you're writing. Eric, if there's anything in the chat, can you see it?
I will address it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to give you about 1 more minute. Okay, so the next part of this activity is I'm going to need one of you to volunteer. And you are going to describe what you have written on your piece of paper. If you're more comfortable replying in the chat, that's okay too. But it might be a bit easier if you are willing to speak into the microphone. But again, whatever your preference is. So if you do want to, oh, we have a hand. I think that is Valeria. Am I correct?
It is Valeria. Go ahead.
So Valeria, just before you start explaining, I don't want you to explain why you responded that way. So let's say perhaps, and I'm going to take a guess and assume you didn't respond this way, but let's say you just ignore your friend. I don't want you to explain why. I just want you to explain the step-by-step process of what you would do, okay?
Okay, perfect. Okay, first of all, I think that I will hug her and I don't know, like try to give or express her or him my support. And later, I think that it's really important to tell him or her that it's important to feel or be or have any emotion that you want to feel, you know? It's okay, it's just that I will be there for you. It's like you can count on me. And if you can make him or her feel like in that way, I think that you feel even more comfortable and you feel like maybe you can talk with me or can talk with, I don't know, any relative that she wants. But the point is that when she understands that she can count on somebody and she's not alone, I think that you gave her or him a lot of support. So yeah, that.
Thank you so much, Valeria. You sound like a great friend. So the next part of this activity, and this is, again, you can text in the chat or feel free to raise your hand. I want us all to discuss and consider why Valeria responded the way she did. So why was her first reaction to give a hug? Why was she so focused on making sure they knew that she supported them? Why do you think this might be her response? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. We're just making interpretations here and some guesses. So take a moment to consider that. Leave your responses in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you.
And sorry, I'm Latina, so it's really normal that everybody gives hugs. We are really like that, so sorry for that also.
No, that's good. You sound like a really good friend.
Gustavo, I like the answer because of empathy. But we're asking you, like, what led her to be the empathetic friend? So why was she an empathetic friend in this situation? And why did she feel a need to give her a hug? Or why did she feel comfortable to give that person a hug? There's a hint, it's on the screen.
Another just prompt you can consider, maybe has Valeria already experienced a situation like this where she has had to comfort a friend, or has she needed to be comforted because of any situation? Those are just things that you can consider as well. I'll give you about 30 more seconds and then I'll discuss. Okay, so it's clear, and I was saying it right from the beginning, Valeria sounds like a really great friend. And what I mean by that specifically is she sounds like she has a lot of emotional intelligence. She really reacts well to other people's emotions and feelings. She's really sympathetic. She can feel what they're feeling, and she wants to be there to not only support them in the moment, but let them know that she is there for them going forward. And this is perhaps, like I said, because she has experienced a situation like this before, or because she is able to put herself in their shoes and consider the ways in which she would want to be comforted. So building trust, like I said, is really important because it allows us to develop these deeper connections with each other, where perhaps Valeria's friend might feel comfortable opening up in front of a bigger group that he or she feels trusted in, and allowing that group to comfort them. And like I said, these are the opportunities also to have these deeper and more meaningful conversations and create ideas and innovations that will really help you move forward with community development and create bonds and break divides.
So one of the last things we want to talk about is, where do we see empathy in the world? And for better or worse, we generally see empathy in our leaders, in our world leaders, the prime minister of our country, the president of our country, maybe CEOs of large scale corporations, or the board directors on NGO. We see these large scale leaders have these empathetic missions and these empathetic goals in life, where they send resources abroad to help resolve some sort of famine or natural disaster, or a world leader. And this may sound weird, but a world leader such as maybe the Prime Minister of Canada sends troops to a certain location. This may sound weird to, like, sending troops to a location as an empathetic thing, but hear me out. It actually is, because you are putting yourself in a situation where you're trying to help people there. Now, obviously, there are some nuances, but when you're trying to help solve a situation, we're trying to make a situation better. Sometimes it requires some sort of armed troop deployment because you are being empathetic to the people there and you want to help those people. Now, obviously, there are some issues with that in itself, and we won't get into that, but be aware that there are many instances of large-scale empathy going around the world. However, this is not the only type of empathy that we want to highlight. The only reason why it's always there is because it gets more media attention than anything else. But frankly, what we argue is that there's actually a smaller scale and a more important type of empathy on the individual side of our day-to-day lives. So think of it from this example. Say there's a volunteer nurse in Western Africa who is helping her community with the Ebola crisis. Okay, she is being empathetic to her community members because she is willing to help out those members get through some sort of medical emergency. How about more local context in our own communities, a volunteer who helps out at a local community food bank or clothing drive? Again, this is an example of an individual being empathetic to his or her community members in a small scale environment. So many of these people don't get any notoriety just because there isn't as much intention on their actions, but it doesn't make it any less empathetic. And frankly, being empathetic on a small scale as an individual is super important because it lays the foundation for large scale systemic change. Empathy is something that's actually contagious. If I'm empathetic to someone else, they're going to be empathetic to me. And also that person's not going to be empathetic to other people. It creates a snowballing effect, which is the idea that things kind of come together and gain momentum to move in a similar direction because everyone is on the same page and everyone is now being empathetic. So being empathetic as an individual allows us to reflect on our roles in society. It means that we can shape and determine how we can actually show empathy and be a member of our community and show an example at the higher levels of our community. It inspires us to make change on a small scale, which makes change on a large scale. By being an empathetic person, you are creating this foundational layer of good, systemic, positive change in the world. Because you can always remember that when you're empathetic towards other people, it encourages those people to be empathetic as well.
So for our final activity, we are going to ask you to, considering what Eric has said and the examples that he has given specifically about local level examples of empathy, we want you to brainstorm ways in which you can use aspects of these examples as inspiration for incorporating empathy into your own daily life. So how can you look at the volunteer at the local soup kitchen or the volunteer nurse in West Africa? How can you use those as inspirations to be more empathetic? Again, take a few seconds to write those down. Okay, and our next question to brainstorm, and it's our final question for brainstorming, is we want you to brainstorm ways in which your own community, city, and country can be more empathetic. Now, we hope that this brainstorming goes well beyond the walls of this workshop and you continue thinking about that after today and hopefully for the rest of your life. But now's a good time to start thinking about them. So write them down, and then in a few seconds again, we'll tell you what the next step is going to be in our workshop. Okay, so I know you're probably still writing them down, but now we are going to do a bit of a personal / kind of group reflection. So this is when you're going to pull out your piece of paper way back from the beginning of the workshop when Eric asked you to consider ways in which you're going to be empathetic today. And now I want you to look at that piece of paper and look at the brainstorming you have just done. And I want you to tell me and Eric if you have perhaps learned something new about empathy, what your examples show you about the new tools that you've picked up. Do you still feel the same way about empathy you did at the beginning that you do now? Do you feel as if you can be more empathetic? Can your community be more empathetic? These are all things that you can tell us about. Again, You can tell us in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you.
And we would like to say that there's no right or wrong answer. This is all a personal reflection on what you think and how you think your opinion or your perspective on empathy has changed throughout this presentation. We encourage you to think about it in a multitude of ways in terms of, have I developed a stronger connection to empathy? Am I more confused about what empathy is? These are all important sort of questions to ask yourself, and it's important to reflect on how your perspective on a certain action like empathy changes and evolves. So we encourage you to sort of mention that if you feel comfortable in discussing with the group. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Jasmine.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so one way my perspective has kind of shifted is that when I think of Canada, I only think of Canada, like in general issues. Like obviously Canada is not perfect, but it is definitely better comparatively to what all is going on around the world. And I think one way as a country or community we could get better is to consider other places as well. Like we don't really often hear about the stuff that is going on or take time to educate ourselves about the things that are going on around the world unless they're like super urgent or they're like everywhere in the news. Otherwise, when you ask somebody about something very general about some other place, they have no clue. So I think it should be part of the educational process as well. And like just as like our general human collective responsibility, I'll say, to take time to reflect on other countries as well, like and like do your part. Like maybe you could sign some petitions relating something or do something about it, right? Or even like share or talk about it with your parents or family. That would be great.
That was a great response. Thank you so much.
Isabella, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay, hello. Well, I'm from Bolivia, and I think that right now my country is in a very complicated situation, and it's because we don't have empathy to each other. We have a really rich cultural country, so we are very different, and but this difference has been made us, apart every time more because we don't listen to each other. We create hate between each other, and this has been affected the political situation in my country. I think with empathy and listening, and actually, recognizing each other problems and recognizing us ours, probably, our country, our, you know, our situation, even the way we talk with our neighbors and known people would be really different, you know, because my country is actually in, everyone's hating on each other, defending some political ideologies which they're not even applied, people looking for their own interest, you know. If we have a little bit more empathy between each other, probably we will be better and we take better decisions because we have a bit amplier and bigger perspective from our world, from our society. There's a thing, that we have a lot of racism against indigenous people, but if you think about it, they don't have the same education as we had. People who lives in cities, they actually have a really deficient education. So they are, like they handle it as ignorant people, and instead of criticizing, probably we should work to to let them know, to give them voice, take them out from ignorance because they've been, have been handled as animals because they don't they don't understand. They are afraid because they handle by, by aggressions. They are feared from the government, and they don't have a voice because they think they don't have a voice because they don't have education. They didn't have education. So I think it's a problem. Empathy can be, don't having empathy between your own people. Can be a big problem. It is right now in my country. So that's it, I think.
Thank you so much.
We have a comment in the chat from Nav Karan. She says, maybe, or he, I apologize, maybe we can try helping some countries that are not as fortunate as us, help them financially or with food resources. And maybe if some time when we need help, some other countries will help us. Additionally, our teacher showed us this video of Admiral McCavan, and we learned that you can't do everything alone. You need someone else to help you paddle through life. That's a very important and powerful message you just mentioned at the end. And it kind of discusses what Isabella just mentioned as well in terms of our way and the way our society has been built. You can't get by yourself. You require these sort of connections and these interactions with other people, and you are stronger as a group rather than as the individual. And it's important to make sure that we are willing and able to recognize and appreciate the perspectives of other people, because when we bring together different perspectives and different interactions, it makes our way of life and our ability to operate much stronger and much more capable. Jasmine adds in the chat, another significant factor would be to express gratitude for certain professions, like our teachers, laborers, doctors, and other law officers, and more importantly, towards the rights we enjoy and take for granted that others don't even have. To acknowledge that we are grateful for all that we have, and will fight for others who don't. That's amazing. That is amazing that you mentioned that in terms of being grateful and being appreciative of what we have and want to share that with others. That does show a level of empathy as well, and making sure that people have equal opportunity to participate in a just society. Gustavo, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you guys. The workshop was amazing. I just wanted to say that I learned something very important today from you, that is, we should develop our empathy every day. I used to think that we should apply empathy only when it is needed, but through the different examples, and especially through the personal examples, when your friend is feeling maybe insecure about himself, or maybe he had a loss, we should use empathy in that way, but also every day when you are maybe in front of your classmates or you want to help them, you are developing your empathy. And I think it is very important to do it every day. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Isabella, your hand is raised. Go ahead. You will have the last word on this, and we'll move on to the final part of our presentation.
I'm sorry. I don't know why it's raised. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Would anyone else have anything to add to this this quick reflection right now before we end off on our final question and answer period? Ariana, go ahead. You have the final word.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so it's more personal than the rest, but like for me, it's difficult to share my emotions with others. So I think that this workshop has helped me a lot, because I have like two really close friends, so with them I'm comfortable like sharing my feelings, and I know how to comfort them. But yeah, it has happened that I don't know how to comfort people in other situations when they are not so close. And with this workshop, I really learned a lot, and yeah, I think it was important for all of us to come and listen and participate.
Thank you for
so Yeah, I was just gonna say, Ariana, I sometimes have the same problem. It's hard for me to comfort people as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Okay, with that, we will move on to the final aspect of our presentation.
And for this aspect, we are going to stop recording, I believe. Eric, does that sound good to you?
Yes, we will stop recording, and then this will be a free and open question and answer period where anyone can ask any question they like without the worry or without the pressure of being recorded. So before we stop recording, I want to thank you all for joining and participating in this workshop, and we sincerely hope that you will participate in the next workshop. And if there's any feedback you would be willing to give to any of us, you have our email address now from the workshop, from the email we sent out earlier today and yesterday. So please feel free to reach out to either Siena or myself with any questions, feedback, or concerns that you might have had, and we'll happily address them. Okay, thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next time.